Felipe Marcelli stood frozen in the doorway, his hand still gripping the crystal tumbler that now trembled against his knuckles. The sight before him shattered every assumption he'd held about the quiet woman who cleaned his mansion. Lily's back was turned to him, her uniform half removed, revealing a canvas of purple bruises and healing cuts that mapped a story of violence across her pale skin. The glass slipped from his fingers, exploding against the marble floor in a symphony that made her spin around, eyes wide with terror. Drop your city in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. Let's dive into the story. But let me take you back to how we arrived at this moment that would change everything. 6 hours earlier, Felipe Marcelli had been celebrating. The Corsican wine deal was finally sealed, marking his most successful quarter since taking over the family business 8 years ago. At 34, he commanded respect from every corner of New York's underground, but tonight felt different. Tonight felt like victory. Don Marcelli, his Lieutenant Marco, approached with measured steps across the study's Persian rug. The celebration dinner is ready. The men are waiting. Felipe loosened his Italian silk tie, the weight of the day finally settling into his shoulders. The mahogany-paneled room smelled of Cuban cigars and aged whiskey, scents that had defined his childhood in this very mansion. His father's portrait watched from above the fireplace, dark eyes holding the same intensity that had built their empire. "Tell them 5 minutes," Felipe said, walking to the window that overlooked the estate's gardens. October rain drummed against the glass, distorting the view of the city beyond. "And Marco, make sure the staff stays clear of the dining room tonight. Some conversations aren't meant for outside ears." Marco nodded and departed with the silent efficiency that made him invaluable. Felipe remained at the window, thinking about the warehouse spaces they'd acquired. The legitimate front would provide perfect cover for their expanded operations. His father would have been proud. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." The door opened to reveal Lily, his newest housekeeper. She'd been working here for 6 months, and despite her obvious intelligence, she kept to herself in ways that intrigued him. Tonight, she carried fresh towels and moved with that particular grace that suggested formal training he'd never asked about. "Excuse me, Mr. Marcelli." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I wanted to finish the guest suites before your dinner guests arrive." Felipe studied her profile as she arranged the towels. Something about her had always seemed out of place. Her diction was too refined for domestic work, her posture too elegant for someone who claimed to have grown up in Queens. But good help was rare, and she never asked questions about the business. "Lily," he said, and she turned those unusual grey eyes toward him. "Take the evening off once you're finished. I don't want any interruptions tonight." She nodded, that small smile ghosting across her lips. "Of course, Mr. Marcelli. Have a pleasant evening." As she left, Felipe noticed something he'd missed before. She favored her left side slightly when she walked, as if protecting an injury. He made a mental note to ask about it later, then dismissed the thought. His world was dangerous enough without borrowing trouble. The dinner proceeded exactly as planned. 12 men around the antique table, voices low as they discussed territorial boundaries and profit margins, the kind of conversation that had kept the Marcelli name feared and respected for 3 generations. By midnight, Felipe's head was swimming with success and aged bourbon. The guests had departed, the staff had cleaned up, and the mansion settled into its familiar nighttime silence. He climbed the grand staircase toward his bedroom, each step echoing in the marble hallway. That's when he heard it. A soft thud, followed by what sounded like muffled crying. Felipe paused, listening. The sound came again, definitely from the staff quarters wing. His protective instincts, honed by years of threats and betrayals, immediately sharpened. An intruder wouldn't cry, but one of his people in distress. That demanded investigation. He moved silently down the hallway, past oil paintings worth more than most people's houses. The crying grew clearer as he approached the small room where Lily lived. His hand moved instinctively toward the gun beneath his jacket, then stopped. This wasn't the sound of danger. This was the sound of pain. Without thinking, he pushed open the door that stood slightly ajar and discovered a truth that would ignite a war. Time crystallized into fragments. Lily's sharp intake of breath, the way moonlight caught the tears on her cheeks, the methodical pattern of bruises that spoke of systematic violence, not accident or clumsiness. Felipe's mind, trained to assess threats and calculate responses within seconds, processed the scene with brutal clarity. Fresh bruises darkened her ribs, Finger marks circled her wrists like obscene jewelry. A cut on her shoulder blade looked infected, angry red lines spreading from its edges. "Mr. Marcelli." Lily's voice cracked as she grabbed for a robe, her movements desperate and clumsy. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were— Who did this to you?" The question emerged as a growl that made her flinch. She pulled the robe tight, but nothing could hide what he'd already seen. "No one. I fell down some stairs. Clumsy of me." Felipe stepped into the room, glass crunching under his handmade Italian shoes. His presence filled the small space, making it feel even tinier. "Don't lie to me, Lily. I've seen enough violence to know the difference between accidents and intent." Her grey eyes darted toward the window, calculating escape routes she'd never reach. "Please, Mr. Marcelli, it's personal business. It won't affect my work." "Personal?" Felipe's voice dropped to that tone his enemies learned to fear. "Someone is using you as a punching bag, and you call it personal?" He moved closer, and she pressed against the wall like a cornered animal. But instead of the harsh interrogation she expected, his voice gentled in a way that surprised them both. "How long has this been happening?" The unexpected kindness broke something inside her. Lily's shoulders sagged as months of fear and exhaustion finally showed. "Since before I started working here. He said if I told anyone, he'd make sure I never worked anywhere in the city again. Said he had connections." Felipe's hands clenched into fists. "Give me a name." "I can't." The words tumbled out faster now. "You don't understand. Vincent has people everywhere. He knows judges, police captains, district attorneys. When I tried to file a report last month, it disappeared. The officer said there was no record of my complaint." Felipe went very still. "Vincent? Vincent Rossi. He manages some warehouse operations in Brooklyn. Has these friends who—" Lily stopped abruptly, seeing the change in Felipe's expression. The color had drained from his face. Vincent Rossi. It wasn't possible. But the description, the connections, the ability to make police reports vanish, it all pointed to one devastating truth. "Lily?" Felipe's voice was carefully controlled now. "Describe him." She hesitated, then seemed to decide cooperation was safer than silence. "Tall, dark hair, always wears expensive suits. Has this scar through his left eyebrow and a tattoo on his wrist. Some kind of bird, the family crest. A phoenix rising from flames, symbolizing rebirth and power. The same tattoo Felipe carried on his own wrist, marking him as blood. Vincent Rossi was Vincent Marcelli, his half-brother, the son his father had never acknowledged, the product of an affair that had nearly destroyed his parents' marriage 30 years ago. Felipe had known of his existence, but had never met him, had assumed he'd disappeared into obscurity with his mother. Apparently, Vincent had other plans. "Where does he hurt you?" Felipe asked, his voice deadly quiet. "What? Where does he take you when he wants to hurt you? Your apartment? His place? Some other location?" Lily stared at him, confusion mixing with fear. "Why do you want to know that?" "Mr. Marcelli, please don't get involved. He'll kill me if he thinks I told someone." Felipe reached into his jacket, and Lily flinched, but instead of a weapon, he pulled out his phone. "Marco," he said when the call connected. "I need a medical team here immediately. Discreet and trustworthy. No hospitals, no records." "Mr. Marcelli, no," Lily protested. "I can't afford— You work for me," Felipe interrupted, ending the call. "Your medical care is my responsibility. That's how this family operates." Family. The word hung between them, heavy with implications neither fully understood yet. Felipe studied her face, seeing past the bruises to the intelligence in her eyes, the strength that had kept her functioning despite the abuse. "Lily," he said carefully, "how much do you know about the man who hired you?" She blinked, thrown by the subject change. "Mrs. Romano from the employment agency said you needed someone reliable and discreet. She said you valued privacy and paid well for it. Mrs. Romano, one of their fronts used for recruiting assets, who didn't ask uncomfortable questions, which meant Lily's placement here hadn't been coincidence. Someone had specifically put her in Felipe's house. Someone who knew exactly who she was and what she meant to him. Even before Felipe himself understood it, the pieces clicked together with terrifying clarity. Vincent hadn't just been abusing a random woman. He'd been systematically destroying someone under Felipe's protection, someone in Felipe's house, someone Vincent knew Felipe would come to care about. This wasn't domestic violence. This was psychological warfare, and Felipe had just declared war on his own blood. Dr. Sarah Chen arrived within 20 minutes, carrying a medical bag that had seen service in places where discretion mattered more than paperwork. She took one look at Lily's condition and got to work without questions, understanding implicitly that some conversations happened outside normal channels. Definitely systematic abuse, Dr. Chen murmured to Felipe as she cleaned the infected wound. Multiple healing stages suggest this has been ongoing for months. She's malnourished, probably from stress. The pattern suggests someone with anatomical knowledge knows exactly how to cause maximum pain while avoiding permanent damage. Felipe's jaw tightened. Vincent had always been smart, calculating. Even his cruelty was methodical. Will she be all right? Physically, yes, but trauma like this leaves deeper scars. She'll need time, probably counseling. Dr. Chen packed her supplies efficiently. Whoever did this is a professional sadist. This wasn't anger or passion. This was control. After the doctor left, Felipe found Lily sitting on her small bed, wearing fresh clothes that covered most of the evidence. She'd regained some composure, but her hands still trembled slightly. "The medical bills," she began, "are handled." Felipe sat in the room's only chair, maintaining distance so she wouldn't feel trapped. "We need to talk about Vincent. I told you I can't—" "Vincent Marcelli." The name landed between them like a physical blow. Lily's face went white. That's not his name. He said Rossi. Rossi was his mother's name. Marcelli is his father's. Felipe watched understanding dawn in her eyes. "He's my half-brother." The silence stretched until Lily found her voice. "Your brother did this to me." "Half-brother," Felipe corrected, though the distinction felt meaningless now. "I hadn't seen him in 15 years. Thought he was living somewhere in California with his mother." "He's been here for at least 2 years," Lily said quietly. "Maybe longer. Has this whole operation in Brooklyn. Warehouse spaces, shipping companies, acts like he owns half the city." Felipe's mind raced. Vincent building a power base in New York, using their father's name when convenient, establishing territory that bordered Marcelli interests. And Felipe had known nothing about it. "How did you meet him?" Lily wrapped her arms around herself. "I was working at this upscale restaurant in Manhattan. He came in a few times, always left huge tips, always asked for my section. Seemed charming, said he was in import-export business." A classic Vincent play, Felipe realized. Identify a target, study their vulnerabilities, then move in slowly. When did it change? After about 2 months of dating. He started getting possessive, asking about my schedule, my friends. Then came the first time he hit me. She touched her cheek unconsciously. Said I'd looked at another man the wrong way. "And you couldn't leave?" "Every time I tried, something bad would happen. I'd lose my job or my apartment application would be denied, or I'd get pulled over for violations that weren't on my record." Lily met his eyes. He made it clear that everything good in my life existed at his discretion. Felipe recognized the strategy: systematic isolation, dependency creation, fear-based control. Vincent hadn't just been abusing Lily. He'd been grooming her for something bigger. "The employment agency that placed you here," Felipe said slowly. "When did Vincent suggest you apply there?" Lily's face crumpled as the realization hit. 3 weeks before I got the job. He said he'd heard they placed people with wealthy families, that the pay was better than restaurant work. The trap's full scope became clear. Vincent had orchestrated Lily's placement in Felipe's house, had spent months breaking her down, making her vulnerable and dependent. But for what purpose? Felipe's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Did you enjoy the show tonight, brother?" Ice flooded Felipe's veins. Vincent knew. Had probably been watching the house, timing everything perfectly. The dinner guests, Felipe's bourbon-clouded judgment, the crying that would draw him to investigate. Vincent had wanted Felipe to find Lily like this. Another text arrived. "We need to talk. Tomorrow, 8 p.m., Pier 47. Come alone, or she pays the price." Felipe showed Lily the messages. She read them twice, her face cycling through confusion, fear, and finally resignation. "He knew," she whispered. Somehow he knew you'd find me tonight." This was planned from the beginning. Felipe's voice carried the deadly calm that preceded violence. "Vincent didn't put you here to spy on me. He put you here to give me something to lose." Understanding flickered in Lily's grey eyes. "Leverage." "Exactly." Felipe stood, pacing to the window where city lights sparkled like scattered diamonds. "The question is, what he wants badly enough to orchestrate this entire psychological operation." Behind him, Lily's voice was small but determined. "What are you going to do?" Felipe studied her reflection in the dark glass. This quiet, intelligent woman who'd somehow become central to a game she'd never chosen to play. Vincent's greatest mistake had been underestimating what she'd come to mean to Felipe in just one evening, not as leverage or an asset or a responsibility, but as someone worth protecting at any cost. "I'm going to end this," Felipe said, turning back to face her. "But first I'm going to make sure you're somewhere he can never touch you again." Lily shook her head. "Running won't work. He'll find me. He always finds me. Not where I'm planning to send you." Felipe's smile held no warmth. Vincent made one crucial error in his planning. What's that? He forgot that this family has been protecting its own for 3 generations, and as of tonight, Lily, your family. The weight of that declaration settled between them. Not romantic, not yet, but something deeper. A bond forged in shared fury and the recognition that some battles could only be fought together. Outside, thunder rumbled across the city, and Felipe wondered if Vincent was listening to it too. Wherever he was planning their reunion, tomorrow night would bring answers, and possibly war. Dawn broke grey and cold over the Manhattan skyline, matching Felipe's mood as he stood in his study, phone pressed to his ear. He'd been making calls since 5 a.m., activating networks Vincent couldn't know existed. "Are you certain about the warehouse locations?" Felipe asked his contact at the Port Authority. The information being shared came at considerable cost, but tonight's confrontation demanded perfect intelligence. "Positive. Vincent Rossi, has legitimate leases on 4 facilities, but our sources suggest he's operating out of at least 12. The man's been busy." Felipe ended the call and added the information to his growing file. Vincent's operation was larger and more sophisticated than anyone had realized. 2 years of careful expansion, while Felipe focused on traditional family territories. A patient, long-term strategy that suggested Vincent was playing a deeper game than simple territory acquisition. A soft knock interrupted his analysis. "Come in." Lily entered carrying a breakfast tray, moving carefully but with more confidence than the night before. Dr. Chen's pain medication was clearly helping, and 8 hours of protected sleep had restored some color to her cheeks. "You don't have to serve me breakfast," Felipe said, gesturing toward the chair across from his desk. "You're recovering." "I need to do something normal," Lily replied, setting the tray down. "Sitting in that room thinking about tonight isn't helping anyone." Felipe studied her face, noting the determined set of her jaw beneath the fading bruises. Vincent had tried to break her spirit, but he'd underestimated the steel beneath her quiet exterior. "How much do you know about warehouse operations?" he asked. The question clearly surprised her. "A little. Before the restaurant, I worked in logistics for a shipping company." "Why?" Another piece clicked into place. Vincent's interest in Lily hadn't just been personal, it had been professional. Her background in shipping logistics would have made her valuable for his expansion plans. "Vincent never asked about your previous work experience." "All the time," Lily said, settling into the chair. "He was particularly interested in how customs inspections worked, what kinds of documentation raised red flags. At first I thought he was just curious about my job. But now I realize he was conducting research." Her voice carried bitter understanding. "He probably learned more about shipping vulnerabilities from pillow talk than most people get from industrial espionage." Felipe's respect for her intelligence grew. "What specific information did he extract?" Lily closed her eyes, clearly forcing herself to remember conversations she'd rather forget. Electronic manifest systems, how to spot modified shipping containers, which port officials were more thorough than others. He was especially interested in seasonal patterns, when inspections were lighter due to holiday schedules. The scope of Vincent's planning became clearer. He hadn't just been building territory, he'd been building expertise, using Lily's knowledge to optimize his operations while simultaneously destroying her psychologically. "There's something else," Lily continued hesitantly. "He had these meetings at his apartment sometimes, always made me stay in the bedroom. But voices carry some of the names I heard." "What names?" "Detective Morrison from the 14th Precinct. City Councilman Bradley. Someone called Judge Martinez." She met Felipe's eyes. These weren't social calls. Felipe's blood chilled. Those names represented significant political influence, enough to challenge the Marcelli family's traditional protection networks. Vincent hadn't just been building a criminal empire, he'd been building a political machine. "Lily," Felipe said carefully, Did Vincent ever mention other family members? Anyone else named Marcelli? She shook her head. He always said his family was dead, that he'd built everything himself. A pause. But there were phone calls, late-night conversations where he'd talk about collecting what was owed and taking back what should have been his. The resentment ran deeper than Felipe had imagined. This wasn't just territorial expansion. It was revenge 30 years in the making. Felipe's phone rang, Marco's name on the display. Don Marcelli. Marco's voice was tight with concern. We have a problem. 3 of our shipping routes were raided this morning. Customs found irregularities in documentation. Felipe's jaw clenched. What kind of irregularities? The kind that someone with inside knowledge could have planted. Routes that have been clean for years suddenly have flagged manifests. Across the desk, Lily had gone pale. He's using what I told him, she whispered. Felipe nodded grimly. Vincent was applying pressure, demonstrating his reach while making it clear that last night's revelation had consequences. The raids would cost millions and draw unwanted federal attention. Marco, Felipe said, implement Protocol 7. All operations go dark until further notice. Sir, that will shut down 60% of our revenue stream. Better than losing it all to federal seizure. Felipe ended the call and found Lily watching him with guilt-stricken eyes. This is my fault, she said. Everything I told him about shipping, about vulnerabilities. You were a victim providing information under duress. Felipe interrupted firmly. Vincent is responsible for how he used it. But your business can be rebuilt. Felipe stood and walked to the window, seeing the city with new eyes. Vincent's influence was everywhere now. Hidden connections that could unravel everything the Marcelli family had built. What matters is stopping him before he destroys more lives. Lily joined him at the window. What happens tonight? He'll make his demands. Probably wants recognition, territory, a seat at tables he's never been invited to. And if you refuse? Felipe's reflection smiled without warmth. Then we find out just how far Vincent is willing to push this war. They stood in companionable silence, watching the city wake up below them. Felipe found himself acutely aware of Lily's presence beside him, the quiet strength that had carried her through months of abuse, the intelligence that made her more than just a victim, the trust she was placing in him, despite having every reason to fear powerful men. Felipe, she said softly, using his first name for the first time, when this is over, what happens to me? The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to explore fully. Felipe turned to face her, seeing past the bruises to the woman Vincent had tried to destroy. That depends, he said quietly, on what you want to happen. Before she could respond, Felipe's secure line rang. The caller ID showed only numbers, but Felipe recognized the pattern. Vincent using an encrypted phone. Felipe answered on the first ring. Hello, brother. Felipe. Vincent's voice carried casual confidence that sent ice through Felipe's veins. I trust you received my messages. I did, though I'm curious why you felt the need to involve an innocent woman in family business. Vincent's laugh was cold. Innocent? Your sweet little Lily has been feeding me intelligence for months, though I suspect you've figured that out by now. Felipe met Lily's horrified eyes, shaking his head slightly to reassure her. Vincent was playing psychological games, trying to create doubt and division. What do you want? Vincent? What's always been mine. The casual mask dropped, revealing decades of rage. Our father built an empire and left it all to you, his legitimate son, while his other son got nothing but shame and exile. Father's will was written by a guilty conscience, Vincent snarled. But wills can be rewritten, especially when the inheritor proves incapable of protecting what matters to him. The threat was clear. Felipe looked at Lily, seeing the fear she was trying to hide. Tonight, Vincent continued, we negotiate a new arrangement, one that recognizes my contributions to this city's economy. And if I refuse, then tomorrow, your lovely housekeeper disappears, along with anyone else you've grown fond of. A pause. I've become quite good at making people disappear, brother. It's one of the skills father never taught you. The line went dead. Felipe set down the phone and found Lily staring at him with a mixture of fear and determination that took his breath away. He's not going to win, she said quietly. Whatever he wants, whatever he's planning, we won't let him win. We. The pronoun carried weight that surprised them both. Felipe realized that somewhere between finding her broken and standing with her now, Everything had changed. This wasn't just about family honor or territorial disputes anymore. This was about protecting the woman who'd become the most important person in his world in the space of 12 hours. And that changed everything. The afternoon passed in careful preparation. Felipe's people moved with silent efficiency, gathering intelligence, positioning assets, preparing for every possible scenario tonight might bring. But despite the activity surrounding him, Felipe's attention kept returning to Lily. She'd spent the day in his study, ostensibly helping with research, but clearly wanting to stay close to the protection his presence offered. Her insights into Vincent's operations proved invaluable. Details about locations, habits and associates that filled crucial gaps in their intelligence picture. The apartment where he kept you, Felipe asked, reviewing blueprints Marco had obtained. Was it always just the two of you? No. Lily traced patterns on the desk surface, her voice distant with memory. Sometimes there were other women. Always bruised, always scared. He'd keep them for a few weeks, then they'd disappear. She looked up. I think I lasted longer because I was useful to him professionally. Felipe's hands clenched. Vincent's operation was larger and more systematic than they'd imagined. Not just territory and politics, but human trafficking. The scope of crimes that would need answering was growing by the hour. Did you recognize any of these women? Names, backgrounds? There was one. Sarah, I think. She said she used to work for a judge's office before Vincent recruited her. Another one, Maria, had been a police dispatcher. Lily's pattern became clear. He targeted women with access to information. An intelligence network built on fear and exploitation. Felipe's respect for his half-brother's strategic thinking warred with disgust at his methods. Lily, Felipe said carefully, tonight I need you somewhere Vincent can't reach you. No. Her response was immediate and firm. He'll know if I'm not there. He'll see it as weakness on your part. I don't care how it looks, I do. She stood, moving to the window where afternoon light caught the gold threads in her hair. He broke me down systematically for months, Felipe. Made me feel powerless and worthless. If I hide now, he wins even if you defeat him. Felipe studied her profile, seeing the strength that Vincent had tried to destroy, but never quite managed to extinguish. This is dangerous. Everything about my life has been dangerous since I met your family. She turned back to face him. At least tonight I get to choose the danger. The conviction in her voice reminded Felipe why he'd found himself drawn to her even before learning her story. Beneath the quiet exterior was a core of steel that months of abuse had dented, but never broken. A knock interrupted them. Marco entered, his expression grim. Don Marcelli, we have a situation. What kind of situation? Vincent's people hit 3 more of our operations this afternoon. Not raids this time. Direct attacks. 2 men in the hospital, 1 warehouse destroyed. Felipe's blood chilled. Vincent was escalating beyond their agreed timeline, applying pressure to force hasty decisions. He's testing your resolve, Lily said quietly, seeing if you'll strike back before tonight's meeting. Both men looked at her, struck by the accuracy of her assessment. If you retaliate now, she continued, he'll claim you broke faith. Use it as justification for whatever he's really planning. Felipe nodded slowly. His half-brother was more cunning than their father had ever been, understanding psychological warfare in ways that complemented traditional violence. No retaliation, Felipe ordered Marco. Not until after tonight. Sir, the men won't understand. The men will follow orders. Felipe's tone brooked no argument. Vincent wants us emotional and reactive. We're going to be professional and strategic. After Marco left, the study fell into contemplative silence. Outside, the city prepared for evening, unaware that forces were aligning that could reshape its criminal landscape forever. Felipe, Lily said softly, what if he's right? About what? About deserving part of what your father built. She held up a hand before he could protest. I'm not defending what he's done to me or anyone else. But from what you've told me about your father's affair, about how Vincent was treated, Felipe had wondered about this himself. His father's guilt over the affair had been obvious, but so had his determination to keep his illegitimate son away from family business. A choice that had seemed protective at the time, but now appeared to have bred decades of resentment. Maybe he did deserve better, Felipe admitted, but he chose revenge over reconciliation. He chose to hurt innocent people instead of approaching me directly. Would you have listened if he had approached you directly? The question caught Felipe off guard. Would he have? A half-brother he'd never met. claiming inheritance rights to an empire built on tradition and blood loyalty. I don't know, he said honestly. Probably not initially, but there would have been a conversation. A chance to find common ground. Vincent doesn't believe in chances, Lily said. He believes in taking what he wants. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Wear the blue dress tonight. The one from Saks. And Lily, don't make me wait. Felipe read the message over her shoulder, his jaw tightening. Vincent was monitoring their communications, demonstrating his reach even into Felipe's secured property. He's watching the house, Lily said, her voice steady despite the implications. Then we give him something worth watching. Felipe's mind was already working through the possibilities. Marco! His lieutenant appeared within seconds, as if he'd been waiting just outside. Change of plans, Felipe announced. I want this place to look like a fortress. Visible security, obvious preparations. Make it clear we're taking no chances. And actually, Marco asked, understanding the distinction between appearance and reality. Skeleton crew. Everyone else goes dark. Felipe's smile was predatory. Vincent expects overwhelming force. We're going to give him the opposite. As Marco departed to implement the new strategy, Lily watched Felipe with growing understanding. You're not just going to negotiate with him. No, Felipe confirmed. I'm going to end this war before it destroys everything we've both lost enough to Vincent's games. She moved closer, her grey eyes reflecting determination that matched his own. Then we do this together. Lily, together, she repeated firmly. He made this about both of us. It needs to be finished by both of us. Felipe looked at this remarkable woman who'd somehow become central to his world in less than 24 hours. The logical part of his mind recognized the insanity of involving a civilian in Mafia business. But Lily wasn't really a civilian anymore, was she? Vincent's actions had drawn her into their world whether she'd chosen it or not, and she was choosing to fight back. All right, Felipe said finally, together, but you follow my lead, and if things go wrong, they won't. Her certainty surprised them both. Vincent spent months thinking he controlled me completely. He has no idea what I'm actually capable of when I'm not afraid anymore. As if to prove her point, she walked to Felipe's desk and opened the secure drawer where he kept backup weapons. She selected a small .22 caliber pistol, checking the chamber with movements that spoke of prior training. There are several things Vincent never knew about me, Lily said, meeting Felipe's surprised look. My father was a police officer. I've been handling firearms since I was 12. Felipe's admiration for her grew even stronger. Vincent had targeted what he thought was a helpless victim, never realizing he was dealing with a woman who could fight back when properly motivated. In that case, Felipe said, let's go show my brother what happens when he threatens family. Outside, darkness was falling over the city, and with it would come the reckoning that had been building for 30 years. Felipe found himself strangely calm, centered by Lily's presence beside him, and the righteousness of their cause. Vincent wanted a war over inheritance and recognition. What he was going to get was justice for every woman he'd brutalized and every life he'd destroyed in his quest for power. And Felipe had a feeling that his half-brother was about to discover that some battles couldn't be won through fear and manipulation alone. Some battles required something Vincent had never possessed, people willing to fight for you rather than against their will. Tonight, that difference would matter more than all the political connections and strategic planning in the world. Mafia Boss Story, Chapters 6-10. Pier 47 stretched into the Hudson River, like a concrete finger pointing toward New Jersey's glittering lights. At 8 p.m., the autumn wind carried salt and diesel fumes across the water, while overhead lights cast harsh shadows between shipping containers and loading equipment. Felipe arrived exactly on time, but he wasn't alone despite Vincent's demands. Lily sat beside him in the passenger seat of his armored Mercedes, her presence both comforting and terrifying. She wore the blue dress Vincent had specified, a calculated decision to show they weren't intimidated by his psychological games. 3 men positioned behind the container wall, Felipe noted, scanning the pier through bulletproof glass. 2 more on the adjacent building's roof. Vincent's brought backup. So did we, Lily replied quietly, touching the small earpiece Felipe's team had given her. Marco's voice would be in her ear throughout the confrontation, along with the voices of 4 other men positioned at strategic points around the pier. Felipe parked under the designated light and stepped out, his Italian wool coat billowing in the wind. Lily emerged from the passenger side, chin raised despite the fear she had to be feeling. Together, they walked toward the end of the pier where a lone figure waited. Vincent Marcelli had their father's height and dark coloring, but where Felipe carried himself with controlled power, Vincent radiated hungry ambition. His expensive suit was perfectly tailored, but something in his posture suggested violence barely contained beneath civilized veneer. "Brother," Vincent called as they approached. "Right on time. I see you brought our lovely Lily." "I don't take orders from family I've never met," Felipe replied, stopping 15 feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to react if violence erupted. Vincent's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Family. How easily you claim that word when it suits you." His dark eyes fixed on Lily. "How are you feeling tonight, darling?" "Rested. I imagine Felipe's been taking good care of you." Lily stepped slightly forward, her voice steady. "Better than I've felt in months, actually." "Brave words from someone who used to cry herself to sleep every night," Vincent said, his tone casual but loaded with threat. "Tell me, Lily, what lies has my brother been filling your head with?" "The only lies I heard came from you," she replied. "About who you were, what you wanted, why you needed information about shipping procedures." Vincent's expression darkened. "Everything I told you served a purpose, including the part about loving you." Felipe felt Lily flinch beside him, but her voice remained steady. "Love doesn't leave bruises, doesn't it?" Vincent's laugh was ugly. "Look around, darling. This whole city is built on beautiful brutality. Our father understood that. He built an empire on knowing when to hurt people and when to protect them." "Is that what this is about?" Felipe asked. "Father's empire?" Vincent turned his full attention to Felipe, and the family resemblance became unmistakable. The same dark eyes, the same strong jawline, the same aura of command. But where Felipe's power felt controlled and purposeful, Vincent's felt wild and desperate. "Father's empire was supposed to be mine too," Vincent said. "Equal inheritance for equal blood." "You were 15 when he died," Felipe pointed out. "Too young for this life. Too inconvenient for this life," Vincent corrected. "Too much of a reminder of his mistakes. So he shipped me off to California with my mother and pretended I didn't exist." Felipe heard the decades of rage beneath the words and felt an unexpected stab of sympathy. "He was trying to protect you." "He was trying to protect himself." Vincent began pacing, his agitation growing. "Do you know what it's like to watch everything that should have been yours given to someone else? To grow up knowing your blood, but not family?" "Then why not approach me directly?" Felipe asked. "When you came back to New York, why not just knock on my door?" Vincent stopped pacing, his smile returning. "And what? Beg for scraps from father's golden boy? Ask for permission to exist in my own city?" He shook his head. "I prefer taking what's mine. By destroying innocent lives? By proving I'm worthy of the name?" Vincent's hand moved inside his jacket. "Father built this family on respect earned through fear. I've simply been earning my place." Felipe tensed, but Vincent didn't draw a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a thick manila folder. "Before we discuss my inheritance," Vincent said, "let me show you something interesting I discovered while building my political connections." He opened the folder and withdrew several photographs, spreading them on a nearby crate like playing cards. Even from 15 feet away, Felipe could see they were surveillance photos, black and white images taken with a telephoto lens. "Do you recognize this woman?" Vincent asked, pointing to one of the photos. Felipe's blood turned to ice. The image showed a younger Lily, but her hair was darker, and she wore professional business attire. She stood beside a man Felipe recognized as District Attorney Michael Harrison, one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in the state. 3 years ago," Vincent continued, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. "Miss Lily Carmichael, yes. Carmichael, not the fake name she gave when she applied to work for you, was an undercover federal investigator, specializing in organized crime." The pier seemed to tilt beneath Felipe's feet. Beside him, Lily had gone completely still. "Special Agent Lillian Carmichael," Vincent read from a document. "FBI Financial Crimes Division, assigned to Operation Bloodline, a joint federal task force investigating the Marcelli family's business operations." Felipe's mind reeled. The woman he'd spent 2 days protecting, the woman he'd begun to care about, the woman he'd brought to this confrontation as his ally, was a federal agent assigned to destroy him. "The abuse was real," Vincent said, noting Felipe's expression. I needed her broken and desperate so she'd do anything to stay close to you. Federal agents are trained to resist interrogation, but trauma makes everyone more pliable. Lily finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. You knew, from the beginning. You knew who I was. Of course I knew. Vincent's triumph was complete. Did you really think your placement in Felipe's house was coincidence? I've been planning this for 2 years, Agent Carmichael. Every detail, every contingency, every beautiful moment of irony. Felipe stared at Lily, seeing her with new eyes. The intelligence he'd admired, the composure under pressure, the way she'd handled a firearm, all evidence of federal training, not personal strength. How long? He asked quietly. Lily turned to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks. Felipe, please let me explain. How long have you been reporting on me? I haven't, she said desperately. The operation was compromised 3 months ago. Vincent found out about my assignment and started using me. Everything since then has been real. My feelings for you, my wanting to help, it's all real. Touching, Vincent interrupted, but also irrelevant. Agent Carmichael's cover was blown long ago. Her federal handler thinks she's dead, killed during what appeared to be a domestic violence incident. He gestured toward the men positioned around the pier. Tonight, that fiction becomes reality. Felipe's mind raced through the implications. An undercover federal agent dying during a Mafia confrontation would bring overwhelming government scrutiny. Vincent wasn't just trying to claim his inheritance, he was trying to destroy the entire Marcelli organization. You want the feds to dismantle everything, Felipe realized. I want them to dismantle you, Vincent corrected. When the investigation is over, when the headlines die down, I'll still be here. Clean, legitimate, above suspicion, ready to rebuild what Father created but under my control. It was brilliant and completely sociopathic. Vincent would sacrifice everything their father had built just to ensure Felipe lost it first. There's one problem with your plan, Felipe said, his voice calm despite the chaos in his mind. Oh, what's that? Felipe looked at Lily, Agent Lillian Carmichael, and saw past the tears to the steel beneath. Whatever else was true, Vincent had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated them both. Your plan assumes we're going to play along, Felipe said. That we're going to stand here and let you destroy everything and everyone. Vincent's confident expression flickered. You don't have a choice. My men have you surrounded. Do they? Felipe smiled for the first time that evening. Lily, would you like to tell my brother about the real operation tonight? Understanding dawned in Lily's grey eyes. She wiped away her tears and stood straighter, her federal training asserting itself. Vincent Martelli, she said, her voice carrying new authority, you're under arrest for human trafficking, extortion, assault, and conspiracy to commit murder. The pier exploded into motion as federal agents emerged from positions Vincent's men had never spotted. The backup he'd relied on was already on the ground, taken down by professionals who'd been planning this moment as carefully as he had. But Vincent's greatest shock was yet to come. You set me up, Vincent snarled, his hand moving toward his weapon as federal agents closed in around the pier. No, Felipe said calmly. You set yourself up. Agent Carmichael has been recording everything you've said tonight. Lily touched her necklace, a piece of jewelry Felipe had given her that morning, but which now revealed itself as sophisticated recording equipment. 3 months of documented threats, confession of systematic abuse, admission of conspiracy to frame Felipe for federal agent murder, more than enough for multiple life sentences. Vincent's face cycled through disbelief, rage, and finally desperate calculation. You can't prove anything. It's your word against mine. Actually, a new voice interrupted from behind them. It's the word of 15 federal agencies against yours. FBI agent Sarah Martinez stepped into the light, followed by a team that had been positioned beyond Vincent's ability to detect. Good evening, Mr. Marcelli. We've been looking forward to this conversation. Felipe turned to Lily with new understanding. How long have you been planning this? Since the moment you found me in that room, she replied. When I saw how you reacted to my injuries, when you called for medical care instead of turning away, I knew Vincent had made a mistake. He thought he'd placed a broken victim in your house. Instead, he'd given me the first ally I'd had since my cover was blown. The pieces clicked together with crystal clarity. You reached out to your handler, through Dr. Chen. She's also federal, FBI medical consultant. When she examined my injuries, I was able to pass along information about Vincent's operation and request backup for tonight. Vincent's backup plan collapsed as efficiently as his main strategy. The men he'd positioned around the pier were all in federal custody, taken down by professionals who'd been watching them for hours. The political connections he'd cultivated couldn't help him now. Many of them were about to face their own investigations based on evidence Lily had gathered. "This is impossible," Vincent said, his composure finally cracking. "I planned every detail, every contingency." "Except one," Felipe said. "You assumed that breaking someone down meant destroying their core identity. Agent Carmichael never stopped being federal law enforcement. She just learned to hide it better." Lily stepped closer to Vincent, her federal authority fully visible now, despite the blue dress and delicate appearance. "Every woman you abused, every operation you ran, every threat you made, it's all documented. The task force has been building a case against you for months. Using information you fed them while I thought you were helpless," Vincent realized. "Information you gave me," Lily corrected. "Every detail about your operations, every name of your associates, every location where you committed crimes. You were so busy proving your power that you confessed to everything." Agent Martinez stepped forward with restraints. "Vincent Marcelli, you're under arrest for federal racketeering, human trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder, assaulting a federal officer, and about 15 other charges we'll read you later." As the handcuffs clicked into place, Vincent's desperate gaze fixed on Felipe. "You think this saves you? You think the feds will just ignore your family's operations now that they have me?" Felipe's smile was genuinely amused. "Actually, Vincent, that's the most beautiful part of tonight," Agent Martinez explained as she secured Vincent for transport. "The Marcelli family has been cooperating with federal investigations for the past 6 months. Mr. Marcelli approached us when he discovered someone was using his family name to commit federal crimes." The final revelation hit Vincent like a physical blow. "You've been working with them." "I've been protecting the legitimate parts of our business," Felipe confirmed. "Father's empire was built on fear and violence, but it didn't have to stay that way. When I learned someone calling himself Marcelli was trafficking women and corrupting officials, I made a choice. You betrayed everything Father stood for." "I evolved beyond what Father stood for," Felipe corrected. "Something you never learned how to do." As federal agents led Vincent away, he turned back for one final attack. "You'll regret this, brother. Both of you. This war isn't over." "Yes, it is," Lily said firmly, "and you lost it the moment you decided to hurt innocent people instead of asking for what you wanted directly." They watched as the convoy of federal vehicles disappeared into the night, taking with them the man who'd terrorized multiple women and tried to destroy everything the Marcelli family had built. In the sudden quiet that followed, Felipe and Lily found themselves alone on the pier for the first time since the crisis began. "So," Felipe said carefully, "Agent Carmichael." "Lily is fine," she replied. "It's my real name, Lillian Carmichael, but I've always preferred Lily." "And the rest of your story? The logistics background? The abusive relationship with Vincent?" "All true. The FBI recruited me from shipping logistics, and Vincent really did abuse me for months. That wasn't part of any operation." Her voice carried pain that federal training couldn't hide. "When my cover was blown, he used my situation to his advantage." Felipe studied her face in the pier's harsh lighting. "What happens now? Do you arrest me too?" Lily was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer carefully. "The task force's investigation is closed. Vincent was the target, not you. Your cooperation eliminated any federal interest in your legitimate businesses, and the illegitimate ones." "What illegitimate businesses?" she asked innocently. "As far as federal records show, the Marcelli family operates restaurants, construction companies, and import-export services, all properly licensed and tax-compliant." Felipe's respect for her grew even stronger. She'd found a way to save them both. "There's something else," Lily continued. "Agent Martinez offered me a promotion, transfer to DC, my own task force, significant salary increase." Felipe's stomach clenched. "Congratulations." "I turned it down." He stared at her. "Why?" "Because," Lily said, stepping closer, "I found something here that's worth more than any career advancement." "What's that?" "A man who called a doctor instead of the police when he found me injured, who protected me from his own family member, who was willing to risk everything to keep me safe." Her gray eyes met his. "A man who made me remember what it felt like to be valued instead of used." Felipe reached for her hands, finding them steady and warm, despite everything they'd been through. "Lily, my world is still dangerous, even without Vincent. There will always be threats, always be people who want to use you to get to me." "I know," she said simply, "but I also know you'll face those threats together, and I'd rather live dangerously with you than safely without you." Felipe kissed her then, there on the pier where they'd just dismantled his half-brother's empire. It was a kiss that tasted of relief and possibility, of endings and new beginnings. When they broke apart, Lily smiled, the first genuinely happy expression he'd seen from her since that first night in his study. "So, what now?" she asked. "Now," Felipe said, "we go home and figure out how to build something better than what came before." Hand in hand, they walked back toward the car, leaving the pier and Vincent's legacy of violence behind them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight had proven they could face anything together. 3 weeks later, Felipe stood in his study, reviewing quarterly reports that looked remarkably different from any his family had ever generated. Legitimate revenue streams had replaced shadow operations. Legal contracts had replaced unspoken agreements. The Marcelli name was being rebuilt on a foundation of respect rather than fear. A soft knock interrupted his work. "Come in." Lily entered carrying 2 cups of coffee and the morning's newspaper. She'd moved into the mansion's main house, but into her own suite, a decision they'd made together as they navigated the complex transition from crisis partners to something deeper. "Page 6, she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "The Vincent Marcelli trial is making headlines again." Felipe scanned the article. Vincent's federal prosecution was proceeding exactly as predicted. Facing multiple life sentences, he'd begun cooperating with authorities, providing information about other criminal organizations in exchange for slightly reduced charges. "No mention of you," Felipe noted, finding the paragraph about federal informants. "Agent Martinez made sure of that. My cover identity is being protected for obvious reasons." Lily sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "Though Vincent's lawyer is pushing for a plea agreement that would require him to testify about family connections." Felipe's jaw tightened. "Meaning?" "Meaning he's trying to drag you down with him. Claims you knew about his operations and chose not to interfere, which I didn't." "Which you didn't," Lily agreed, "but prosecutors want to be absolutely certain. Agent Martinez called this morning. They'd like us both to provide depositions next week." The federal scrutiny was expected, but still uncomfortable. Even with their cooperation agreement, every interaction with law enforcement carried risks. "Are you concerned?" Felipe asked. "About the depositions?" "No." "About Vincent's claims?" Lily considered carefully. "He's desperate enough to say anything, but the evidence speaks for itself. Your businesses have been clean for months. Your cooperation with the task force is documented, and every witness confirms Vincent was acting independently." Felipe's phone rang, Marco's name on the display. "Don Marcelli." Marco's voice carried unusual tension. "We have a situation requiring immediate attention." "What kind of situation?" "The kind involving Mrs. Carmichael's former colleagues." Felipe's blood chilled. Lily's federal identity had been carefully protected, but law enforcement was a small community. Discovery was always possible. "Where?" "The main gate. 2 agents requesting immediate audience. They claim it's about Agent Carmichael's safety." Felipe met Lily's eyes across the desk. She was already standing, her expression shifting into federal agent mode. "We'll be down in 2 minutes," Felipe said. They descended the grand staircase together, Felipe noting how naturally Lily had taken to moving through his world. The frightened woman Vincent had broken was gone, replaced by someone who carried both federal authority and personal confidence with equal grace. At the mansion's main entrance, 2 agents waited with the careful patience of professionals accustomed to dealing with dangerous people. Felipe recognized the type immediately. Career federal law enforcement, probably 15 to 20 years of experience each. "Agent Carmichael," the senior agent said as they approached. "Agent Robert Hayes, FBI Internal Affairs. This is Agent Jennifer Walsh, Department of Justice." Internal Affairs. Felipe's protective instincts sharpened immediately. Internal Affairs didn't make social calls. "Agent Hayes," Lily replied, her federal training evident in her posture and tone. "What brings you here?" "Questions about your undercover operation," Agent Walsh said. "Specifically about how you survived Vincent Marcelli's discovery of your identity." The implication was clear. Someone suspected Lily's survival had required compromising her federal duties. "I survived through professional training and personal resilience," Lily replied evenly. The same way any agent would. Is that so? Agent Hayes pulled out a tablet, scrolling through what appeared to be surveillance footage. Because our investigation suggests a different explanation. He turned the screen toward them. The footage showed Felipe's mansion 3 weeks ago, the night Vincent had been arrested. But the timestamp showed it had been recording hours before their confrontation at the pier. This footage was retrieved from Vincent Marcelli's surveillance operation, Agent Walsh explained. It shows extensive federal activity around this property throughout the evening. Coordination that would have required advanced planning and official approval. Felipe felt the trap closing around them. Vincent's final revenge, evidence that could suggest Lily had compromised her federal objectivity by working too closely with her target. The operation was officially sanctioned, Lily said carefully. By whom? Agent Hayes asked. Because according to federal records, Agent Lillian Carmichael was listed as deceased 3 months ago. Dead agents don't receive operational approval. The bureaucratic nightmare Felipe had feared was materializing. Vincent's abuse of federal systems had created documentation problems that could destroy Lily's career and potentially prosecute her for impersonating a federal officer. There are circumstances, Lily began. Circumstances that require explanation, Agent Walsh interrupted, which is why Agent Carmichael needs to come with us for formal debriefing. Felipe stepped forward, his protective instincts overriding caution. Agent Carmichael is under my family's protection. Any official interaction requires legal representation. Mr. Marcelli, Agent Hayes said, Agent Carmichael is a federal employee suspected of compromising her duties. Your family's protection is exactly what we're investigating. The moment balanced on a knife's edge, Lily could go with them and face whatever consequences Internal Affairs had planned, or she could refuse, and potentially face federal fugitive charges. There's a third option, a familiar voice said from behind them. Agent Martinez appeared from a black SUV that had arrived silently during the confrontation. Her presence immediately shifted the dynamic. She outranked both Internal Affairs agents and had direct authority over the Vincent Marcelli investigation. Agent Martinez, Agent Hayes said, clearly frustrated. We're conducting an internal investigation into an operation I supervised, Agent Martinez replied firmly. Agent Carmichael was working under deep cover with my full authorization. Her survival and continued operation were essential to dismantling Vincent Marcelli's organization. She approached the group with the confident authority of someone accustomed to bureaucratic battles. Any questions about Agent Carmichael's actions can be directed through proper channels, which means through me. Agent Walsh checked her tablet. Our records show paperwork filed during a compromised operation, Agent Martinez interrupted. When Agent Carmichael's cover was blown, we made tactical decisions to protect both the agent and the investigation. Documentation was deliberately obscured for operational security. It was a masterful explanation that turned Vincent's sabotage into intentional federal strategy. Agent Carmichael reported to me throughout the operation, Agent Martinez continued. Her cooperation with Mr. Marcelli was authorized and essential to our success. Without her work, Vincent Marcelli would still be trafficking women and corrupting public officials. Agent Hayes clearly wanted to push further, but Agent Martinez's authority was absolute within the investigation's scope. This matter will require review, he said finally. I'm sure it will, Agent Martinez replied pleasantly. Feel free to submit your concerns through the proper chain of command. In the meantime, Agent Carmichael remains under my operational authority. The Internal Affairs agents departed with obvious reluctance, their investigation stalled by bureaucratic reality. After their vehicle disappeared down the mansion's driveway, Agent Martinez turned to Lily with a slight smile. That should buy us some time, she said, but they'll be back. Internal Affairs doesn't like unanswered questions. What do you recommend? Felipe asked. Agent Martinez considered carefully. Agent Carmichael could request transfer to another division, somewhere Internal Affairs has less influence, or she could resign from federal service and pursue other opportunities. Agent Martinez's gaze shifted between them. I understand there might be personal incentives for that choice. Felipe looked at Lily, seeing the federal agent warring with the woman who'd found something worth protecting in his world. What would you choose? He asked her. Lily was quiet for a long moment, considering a decision that would reshape her entire future. I spent 3 years undercover in criminal organizations, she said finally. I've seen the worst humanity has to offer, the damage that people can do when they choose power over principle. She moved closer to Felipe, her decision crystallizing. But I've also seen what happens when someone chooses to change, to build something better than what came before. That's rarer and more valuable than any federal investigation. Agent Martinez nodded understanding. I'll process your resignation paperwork, with appropriate commendations for your work on the Marcelli investigation. As the FBI agent departed, Felipe found himself alone with Lily on the steps of the mansion that had become their shared refuge. Any regrets? He asked. About leaving the FBI? Lily considered the question seriously. No. About everything that led us here? Definitely not. She reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining with a familiarity that still amazed them both. Besides, she said, someone needs to make sure the legitimate Marcelli businesses stay legitimate. I have experience with financial compliance and federal regulations. Felipe's smile was genuine and warm. Are you applying for a job, Agent Carmichael? Former Agent Carmichael, she corrected. And yes, I believe I am. They stood together on the mansion's steps, watching the city lights twinkle beyond the estate's gates. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they were simply two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and chosen to build something beautiful from the wreckage of Vincent's hatred. Behind them, the mansion's lights glowed warmly against the autumn darkness, no longer a fortress against the world, but a home where love had triumphed over violence, where understanding had replaced fear, and where two broken people had healed each other. 6 months later, the Marcelli family's transformation was complete. The mansion buzzed with legitimate activity. Lawyers reviewing contracts, accountants managing transparent finances, and business partners who'd never asked about the family's former reputation. Felipe stood in the garden where he'd first kissed Lily, watching her coordinate with the caterers preparing for tonight's charity gala. The event would raise money for domestic violence shelters, turning the mansion that had once symbolized fear into a beacon of hope for women in situations Lily understood too well. The silent auction items are ready, she reported, approaching with a tablet full of organizational details. We've raised over $200,000 before the event even begins. Her transformation amazed him daily. The quiet, frightened woman Vincent had tried to destroy was now a confident executive who managed both their legitimate businesses and their philanthropic efforts with equal skill. Any word from Agent Martinez about Vincent's sentencing? Felipe asked. Life without parole plus 40 years, Lily replied with satisfaction. The judge called his crimes against women systematic terrorism designed to destroy human dignity. Vincent's appeals were all denied. Justice served, but Felipe found himself thinking less about his half-brother and more about the future they were building. Tonight's gala represented everything Vincent had tried to prevent, the Marcelli name associated with protection rather than violence, with building up rather than tearing down. Felipe, Lily said softly, there's something I need to tell you before the guests arrive. The serious tone made him focus completely on her. What is it? She led him to the garden's center, where white roses bloomed around the fountain that had been restored to its original beauty. I got a call from Agent Martinez this morning. Vincent wants to see me. Felipe's protective instincts flared immediately. Absolutely not. Hear me out, Lily said, taking his hands. He's requesting a meeting before he's transferred to federal supermax prison. Claims he has information about other women he victimized, women who haven't been identified yet. The implications were significant. If Vincent knew about other victims, that information could provide justice and closure for families who might still be wondering what happened to their daughters, sisters, wives. It's a manipulation, Felipe said firmly. Vincent doesn't do anything without ulterior motives. I know that, but Agent Martinez thinks the information might be genuine. Vincent's facing life in prison regardless. He has nothing left to lose by telling the truth. Felipe studied her face, seeing the federal agent's sense of justice warring with the woman's need for closure. What would such a meeting accomplish? Answers, Lily said simply. For me and for other families. I need to know if there were others, Felipe. I need to know if I could have prevented their suffering by acting sooner. The guilt she carried was something Felipe understood. He'd felt similar responsibility for not knowing about Vincent's operations, for not protecting the women his half-brother had destroyed. If you're determined to do this, Felipe said, then you won't go alone. The federal facility won't allow. Then we find another way. Felipe's mind was already working through possibilities. Agent Martinez owes us considerable favors. The successful prosecution of Vincent's organization, the dismantling of his political network, the recovery of millions in trafficking proceeds, all of that happened because of our cooperation. Lily nodded slowly. You think she'd arrange something unofficial? I think she'd arrange whatever keeps you safe while getting Vincent's information. Felipe's smile held no warmth. And I think Vincent might be more forthcoming if he knows I'm watching. 3 days later, they sat across from Vincent Marcelli in a federal holding facilities conference room. He looked older, diminished by months of incarceration and the knowledge that he'd lost everything. But his eyes still held the intelligence that had made him dangerous. Brother, Vincent said as they entered, and the lovely former Agent Carmichael, thank you for coming. We're here for information about your victims, Lily said, taking the seat across from him. Nothing else. Vincent studied her with obvious fascination. You look different, healthier. Prison agrees with me less than freedom agrees with you. Felipe remained standing behind Lily's chair, his presence a clear reminder of the protection Vincent could no longer threaten. The other women, Lily pressed. Agent Martinez says you have information. 7 women over the past 3 years, Vincent replied, his voice taking on a confessional tone. All recruited through legitimate employment, all isolated and controlled through systematic abuse. He recited names, dates, locations, with the mechanical precision of someone trying to reduce his sentence through cooperation. Each detail represented another life destroyed, another family torn apart by his sociopathic ambitions. Maria Santos worked for city planning. Disappeared 8 months ago after she refused to provide zoning information. Sarah Chen was a court clerk who stopped cooperating when I asked for sealed case files. Jessica Williams was a police dispatcher who— Enough, Lily interrupted, her voice thick with emotion. Where are they now? Vincent's expression showed what might have been genuine remorse. Dead. All of them. When they became liabilities instead of assets, my associates handled the situation permanently. The conference room fell silent, except for the humming of fluorescent lights. Felipe felt Lily's pain as if it were his own, the knowledge that she'd survived where others hadn't, the survivor's guilt that would haunt her regardless of logic or reason. Why? She asked. Why tell us this now? Vincent leaned forward, and for the first time since they'd known him, his mask of calculated charm completely disappeared. Because I want you to understand what I prevented. What you prevented, if I hadn't claimed you. If I hadn't kept you alive for your usefulness, you would have ended up like them. Vincent's voice carried disturbing sincerity. In my own twisted way, I protected you. I kept you valuable enough to survive. The psychological manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity. Vincent was trying to reframe his abuse as salvation, his violence as protection. You tortured me for months, Lily said, her voice steady despite the tears flowing down her cheeks. I kept you alive when my associates wanted you eliminated, Vincent replied. I gave you a chance to escape when I could have easily made you disappear. Felipe moved to stand beside Lily's chair, his hand on her shoulder providing strength for what needed to be said. Vincent, Lily said, looking directly into his eyes, you didn't save me. Felipe did. You didn't protect me. Love did. You didn't give me a chance to escape. I created that chance by refusing to let you destroy who I was underneath the fear. Vincent's expression cracked, revealing the rage that had always driven him. You think your fairy tale ending changes anything? You think love conquers all? No, Felipe said quietly, but it conquers you. Everything you tried to build, everyone you tried to control, all the power you thought you'd accumulated, none of it matters now. You're going to die in prison, forgotten and powerless, while we build something beautiful from what you tried to destroy. The truth of those words hit Vincent like a physical blow. He'd lost everything. His empire, his freedom, his brother's respect, even the psychological control he'd held over Lily. He had nothing left but the knowledge that he'd failed completely. This meeting is over, Agent Martinez announced from the doorway, having monitored their conversation for legal purposes. As they prepared to leave, Vincent made one final attempt at connection. Felipe, we're still family, blood still means something. Felipe paused at the door, considering his response carefully. When he spoke, his voice carried finality that would echo in Vincent's cell for years to come. Family protects each other, Felipe said. Family builds each other up. Family chooses love over fear. He looked at Lily, then back at his half-brother. You never understood that. And that's why you'll die alone. They left Vincent in the conference room, surrounded by federal agents and facing the rest of his life behind bars. Outside, the autumn sun felt warm on their faces as they walked toward the car that would take them home. "Do you have closure now?" Felipe asked. "I have truth," Lily replied. "That's better than closure. It means I can help other families find their truth too." In the car driving back toward the mansion where their new life waited, Lily reached for Felipe's hand and found it steady and warm, the same hand that had reached for her in darkness and pulled her toward light. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too," he replied, bringing her fingers to his lips for a gentle kiss. Behind them, the federal facility grew smaller in the rearview mirror, carrying with it the last vestiges of Vincent's hatred and the final shadows of their past. Ahead lay the mansion, the charity gala, the legitimate businesses they were building together, and a future bright with possibilities that Vincent's darkness could never touch again. 1 year later, Felipe stood at the altar of the small chapel on the mansion's grounds, watching Lily walk toward him in a dress that caught the morning light like spun silver. The audience was small but meaningful. Agent Martinez representing the federal family that had adopted Lily, Marco and the other men who'd become loyal to their new direction, and Mrs. Chen, the doctor whose discretion had started their journey toward trust. But Felipe only had eyes for Lily, for the woman who'd survived Vincent's cruelty and chosen to build something beautiful with the man Vincent had tried to destroy. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, but Felipe was already lost in Lily's grey eyes, seeing in them the future they'd fought so hard to create. The vows they'd written themselves spoke of redemption and second chances, of love that had triumphed over violence, of choosing each other daily despite the dangers their world would always contain. "I take you not just as my husband," Lily said, "but as my partner in building something better than what came before, in protecting those who can't protect themselves, in proving that love really can conquer all." Felipe's voice was steady as he made his promises. "I take you as my wife, my equal, my conscience and my strength. You saved me from becoming the man I was expected to be and helped me become the man I chose to be." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss tasted of joy and possibility, of endings that were really beginnings, of a love that had been forged in darkness but would flourish in light. The reception in the mansion's garden was everything Vincent's violence had tried to prevent. Laughter instead of fear, celebration instead of destruction, hope instead of despair. Agent Martinez raised a toast to the most successful undercover operation in federal history, not because of the criminal it caught, but because of the love it revealed. Marco spoke about watching his Don choose honor over tradition, compassion over control. Felipe Marcelli proved that real strength isn't about making people fear you, he said. It's about making them want to follow you towards something better. As evening approached and their guests departed, Felipe and Lily found themselves alone in the garden, where they'd taken their first tentative steps toward trust. The fountain bubbled peacefully, and white roses perfumed the air with sweetness that erased any memory of violence or fear. "Mrs. Marcelli," Felipe said, testing how her new name sounded. "I like it," Lily replied, settling into his arms as they swayed to music only they could hear. "Though I'm keeping Carmichael for business purposes, Lily Carmichael Marcelli has a nice ring to it." The hyphenated name represented everything they'd built together. Her federal expertise combined with his family resources, her moral clarity balancing his pragmatic understanding of power, her determination to help others merged with his ability to provide protection and resources. "What happens now?" she asked, echoing the question that had started their journey together on a pier where they dismantled Vincent's empire. "Now," Felipe said, "we live the life we chose instead of the life that was chosen for us." They'd already begun that transformation. The mansion operated as both their home and the headquarters for the Marcelli Foundation, providing resources for domestic violence survivors and funding programs that helped women rebuild their lives after trauma. Felipe's legitimate businesses had expanded beyond anyone's expectations, proving that success built on respect lasted longer than empires built on fear. The Marcelli name was becoming associated with community investment, employee protection, and ethical business practices. But more than external success, they'd found something Vincent's worldview couldn't comprehend: the strength that came from vulnerability, the power that flowed from trust, the wealth that accumulated when you lifted others up instead of tearing them down. "I have a confession," Lily said as they danced under stars that had witnessed their entire journey. "What's that?" "Sometimes I think about Vincent in his cell and I feel grateful." Felipe's eyebrows rose. Grateful? Grateful that his cruelty brought us together. Grateful that his manipulation created the circumstances for us to find each other. She looked up at him with eyes that held no fear. "No doubt, only love." "I wouldn't change anything about our story, Felipe. Not even the dark parts." Felipe understood. The darkness had been real and terrible, but it had also revealed the light they carried within themselves, light that might have remained hidden if circumstances hadn't forced them to choose between love and fear. "Vicente thought he understood power," Felipe said. "He thought breaking people down made you strong. He never realized that building people up, protecting them, caring for them, that's what real power looks like." As if summoned by their conversation, Felipe's phone chimed with a text message. "Agent Martinez," sending an update they'd been expecting. "Vincent died in federal prison this morning," Felipe read aloud. "Heart attack. No suspicious circumstances." They stood quietly for a moment, absorbing the news. Vincent's death meant the final closing of a chapter that had defined too much of their lives. "How do you feel?" Lily asked. Felipe considered the question seriously. "Sad," he said finally. "Not for who he became, but for who he could have been if he'd chosen differently." Lily nodded, understanding. "He wasted so much potential on hatred." "But we didn't," Felipe replied. "We chose to transform potential into something beautiful." They resumed dancing, moving slowly through the garden where their love had first taken root. Around them, the mansion glowed with warm light, no longer a fortress against the world, but a beacon of hope for anyone seeking proof that redemption was possible. In the distance, New York City sparkled with millions of lights, each one representing a life, a story, a chance for someone to choose love over fear, understanding over violence, building up over tearing down. "I love you, Mrs. Martelli," Felipe murmured against Lily's hair. "I love you too, Mr. Martelli," she replied, her voice carrying all the joy that Vincent's darkness had tried to extinguish. They danced until the stars faded into dawn, celebrating not just their wedding night, but the triumph of everything Vincent had tried to destroy. Love had conquered fear. Hope had defeated despair. Two broken people had healed each other and chosen to spend their lives healing others. In his federal prison cell, Vincent Marcelli had died alone, forgotten by a world that had moved on without him. But in a garden perfumed with white roses, Felipe and Lily Marcelli began their married life surrounded by love, purpose, and the absolute certainty that choosing each other had been the best decision either of them had ever made. Their story had begun with violence and manipulation, with a cruel man's attempt to destroy two lives for his own twisted purposes. It ended with a wedding dance under starlight, with vows that promised forever, and with the knowledge that love, real love, chosen love, fought for love, really could conquer all. The Marcelli family name would live on, but not as a symbol of fear or violence. Instead, it would represent redemption, second chances, and the revolutionary idea that true power came from lifting others up rather than tearing them down. And in the mansion that had once housed secrets and violence, laughter echoed through rooms where children would one day play, where business would be conducted with integrity, and where two people who'd found each other in darkness would spend the rest of their lives creating light. Vincent had been wrong about everything that mattered. Love really did conquer all.